Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We greatly appreciate your support and interest in contributing to the knowledge economy. My name is Dan Stringer, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of Gateway Centre of Excellence in Rural Health. Gateway is located in Goderich, Ontario, Canada. To our knowledge, it's the only rural health research centre in Canada governed by a community-based volunteer group. Partnered with several academic centres and healthcare facilities, Gateway aims to advance rural health teaching and research across Huron, Perth, Grey, and Bruce counties. Our mission is to improve the health and quality of life of rural residents through research, education, and communication. A little over a year ago, Gateway launched this virtual lecture series with social isolation being top of mind as COVID-19 restrictions continued to heighten. There seemed no better time to launch this initiative. And through this lecture series, our hope is to promote a culture of rural health knowledge and innovation while virtually connecting individuals and communities to help reduce social isolation. We do give diplomas at the end of each semester for those with perfect attendance. Today's speaker is Jay McFarlan. Jay is Vice President of the Gateway Board of Directors and serves as the Research Chair of Rural Nutrition and Exercise. Jay was raised in Clinton and completed his Bachelor of Health Sciences degree in 2005 at Western University. Throughout his undergrad years, Jay worked in the Blackburn Cardiovascular Genetics Lab, researching risk factors for diabetes and heart disease. He stayed at Western for a Master of Science degree in biology, graduating in 2007. His research there investigated the unique physiology that permits migratory birds to fuel their long-distance migrations. Jay then went to the University of Guelph to pursue a PhD in human health and nutritional science with a research focus on the molecular switch for fat metabolism in exercising muscle. Jay left that degree to focus on raising his family near Brucefield and commit more time to his local community. In the time since, Jay has volunteered his expertise through Gateway as Research Chair of Rural Nutrition and Exercise and has supervised several summer students to research and develop programs that serve rural Ontario. And Jay does all of the tech associated with bringing these lectures to you, and for that, Gateway is really grateful. Thanks, Jay. Today's lecture today is titled, What Makes You Move? Motivations for Staying Active in Rural Ontario. And with Jay today are panelists Chris Lee and Anne-Marie Thomson. Chris is a longtime resident of Huron East and a former member of the Gateway Board. He is a Walton-based business owner who developed the outdoor recreation facility Edge of Walton Challenge Course and Walton Raceway. Chris is a trail advisory chair for the Goderich-to-Guelph Rail Trail, G2G, a member of the board of directors of the Regional Tourism Organization 4, RTO4, and the Canadian Centre for Rural Creativity. He lives adjacent to the Ray Tract County Forest and the G2G Trail, and as an avid cyclist, he enjoys both. Anne-Marie is the general manager for the Goderich YMCA and has worked for the Y for over 24 years. She is passionate about building a healthy community and working alongside like-minded organizations to help make a difference in the lives of others. Anne-Marie is an avid boater, spending her summers on Lake Huron. She enjoys hiking the many trails we have in Huron County and has recently begun learning to play pickleball. So thank you very much, panelists, for joining us today. And I'll pass this back to you now, Jay, to begin today's discussion.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, especially to our panelists, Chris and Anne-Marie. So Chris and Anne-Marie, you'll join me for a discussion after I've gone through this PowerPoint presentation here. And I welcome everyone in the audience to type a question in the Q&A box if you have one, or in the chat box, and we'll get around to them during the discussion. So I'm going to start my PowerPoint, and I'm going to try something a bit different here. I saw a new feature in Zoom. I'm really excited to try it. It's funny, the things that get me excited these days. It's a new feature in Zoom. I can share my PowerPoint as a background to my video. see how this goes. Okay, there we go. So I'd like to lead you through on my journey in research and how it's led to some of the programs I've developed through Gateway, and then talk about the motivations for staying active in rural Ontario. This picture, very relevant. That's my kids playing in the mud. That's one of my big motivations for staying active, is to keep up with the kids. So the motivation to move has been a research topic of interest for me for the last 10 years. And before that, I acknowledged the importance of physical activity, but I didn't really take it very seriously. So this last year, though, I turned 40 this past year, and I don't know if you call it a midlife crisis or maybe a New Year's resolution, but I've been trying to take my physical activity, my physical health a bit more seriously and walk the walk and not just talk the talk. All right, let's see if we can advance the slide. Oh, it's hidden by the captions. I gotta turn off captions. Unforeseen issues. Oh, that's frustrating. There it is. Okay. So, New Year's resolutions. This is typically the time of year where we see people drop off from New Year's resolutions. They tend to lose that motivation. So I'd like to do something, and I'd like just to poll the audience. Well, what do you think is the most common New Year's resolution? Pick any single choice there. Just typically, regardless of age or cultural status, where you're from, feel free to answer the question. What do you think is the most common New Year's resolution? Okay, all the votes are in. We'll share the results. So, losing weight seems to be the popular topic among the people in the audience today. Well, that's in contrast to what the results of the science say. I guess, well, losing weight could be grouped in with physical health, but they are very separate things. And weight loss is a goal, whereas improving physical health, it can have a variety of outcomes, weight loss perhaps being one. But improving physical health, it really is the most common New Year's resolution that people will put out. This is a particular, this study in particular is from a group in Sweden, very large cohort, about 1,000 people from a wide swath of socioeconomic status and age. And right for their New Year's resolution of would be January 1st of 2020. So a lot has changed since then. We don't know what New Year's resolutions are like these last couple of years. I have to wait for the science to come out on that. But this is what we're looking at these days. So the big question is, why is it so hard to establish long-lasting change? Why is that such a barrier? What are the motivators to move? So I'll talk first about my personal journey in research and how I got to asking this particular question, and then I'll get to talking about some of the programs at Gateway. So there's me up above there in my smug undergrad smile. I think I have all the answers, but I was very, very wrong. At the time, I was working at the cardiovascular genetics lab at Western with one of Canada's leading scientists, Robert Hagley. I was really excited to be there. And we were researching how single gene mutations, single nucleotide polymorphisms, contribute to the genetic risk factors for type 2 diabetes. And especially in native populations, because we've seen this very high rate of type 2 diabetes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome in native populations. And so that was sort of my initial background into it. And at the time, this is back in the early 2000s, there's a lot of talk about the thrifty gene hypothesis. This is something that was proposed back in the 60s by James Neal to explain the prevalence of diabetes in modern day society. And that's that type 2 diabetes has a very strong genetic component. And so thrifty genes are the ones that enable us to efficiently collect and store fat, deposit fat for those periods of food abundance, and then have the feast and famine, and we can get through the famine. And if we survive the famine, well, our thrifty genes go on and they propagate in the population. This is probably advantageous back in the hunter-gatherer populations because it allowed them to fatten more quickly in those times of abundance. But in modern society, with the constant abundance of food, this thrifty gene, it prepares individuals for a famine that never comes. So one of those things that was happening in the early 2000s was the sequencing of the human genome. And there have been several studies since that have found little evidence for this thrifty gene hypothesis. And I'll talk more about this later, but let's just get back to my storyline and how I got to here right now. So in my final year of undergrad, I took a course on comparative animal physiology. Honestly, I needed the credit and it fit my time schedule. But this ended up being a life-changing course for me. The professor of the course, Chris Guglielmo, he was very excited to be talking about the biochemistry of bird migration and how they fuel that long distance flight. I mean, there's some species that spend days or thousands of miles nonstop. And the motivation for that is pretty clear. I mean, they have to survive and have to propagate their genes, or they freeze and starve in the Canadian winter. So it wasn't really, the motivation at that point wasn't a question for me. It was more of a, how do they do it? How do they fuel these long distance flights? And that course I ended up doing a master's with Dr. Guglielmo as my supervisor and researching that biochemistry question. How do they fuel that migration? Well, to give you the Coles notes, the answer is they crank up the dial on burning fat. It was not new news at the time, but some of the questions about the molecular machinery involved, but that's what I helped to contribute to the science. I was like, oh, I missed a slide there. There we go. There's the white-throated sparrow. That's the bird that I was researching. You'll hear it in actually pretty soon, another month or so, we start to hear it. It's that kind of wavery whistle that goes on. You hear it a lot in the Muskoka region during the summer. It's that really characteristic Northern Ontario summer sound. So then after Guelph, after Western, I went on to Guelph where I studied mammalian muscle. I was looking more closely at how that dial is controlled in mammals, how exercise cranks up the dial on burning more fat. That there's a lot of discussion at this time about a drifty gene hypothesis to explain the modern prevalence of type 2 diabetes, unlike the thrifty gene hypothesis. So genetic drift is just when genes encoding that regulation system, so in this case for fat, storing fat, when that regulation control system has an upper limit on our body fatness. And it has less to do with the sequence of the DNA, but more the expression, the regulation of that DNA. And it's more of an epigenetic factors influencing gene expression, not the sequence itself, perhaps. This is part of the drifty gene hypothesis. And it provides that some of the advancements at this time in the 2010s was we had sequenced a lot of genomes. You could start to get into this, the 23andMe or the Ancestry, or you ship off a tube of your saliva and they'd come back with a DNA sequence. And so there's a lot of data, and we're finally getting to answering questions around, is the thrifty gene something is there evidence for it? Well, as it turns out, there's actually very little evidence for the thrifty gene hypothesis. And there's maybe some more evidence for the drifty gene hypothesis, that it's just our current state is just by random chance. And our ancestry with this feast and famine and abundance and starvation has had very little to do with our current population genetics. And so we can talk more about that in the question and answer period, but this is around 2010. There's a lot of talk about exercise pills. And there's some severe side effects to exercise pills that were developed around that time, including cancer. And that's a pretty big one. So it turns out that most of these pills, work by creating leaky mitochondria. You might remember from high school biology, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It can generate, the mitochondria will generate free radicals if they're left to be leaky by this exercise pill. So that oxidative damage from free radicals can lead to DNA damage, which causes cancer. And so this path of an exercise pill, it really does not look like it's a good path or even achievable. And so that's not a path we're likely going to go down. So, but it brings into question, why is it so hard just to find the motivation to move, like just to actually exercise? And it's around this time that I had to reprioritize my life. And I had some kids and a family at home. I left academia, but I've continued to work on community health projects. And I'd like to talk about one in particular, the Grand Sparks program. Before I get into that, the idea of a sedentary death syndrome, and it's a scary syndrome that was coined by Frank Booth back in the 90s. It was a sort of one of those phrases that makes you think you might be a kook scientist. Sedentary death syndrome. What's this guy talking about? Well, over the subsequent decades, there's more and more evidence that it's the time spent inactive that's detrimental to our health. And so focusing on changes that remove the inactivity rather than focusing on changes that increase activity that's the right kind of motivation from a public health standpoint. Because if it's a sedentary death syndrome is a public health burden, then there is a cost on our healthcare system. This is back in 2000, a famous study now from a group at York University that calculated what is the economic cost to Canada for physical inactivity. Back in $2000, it was $2.1 billion per year. And that's in preventable illness, preventable death, years of life or quality of life lost. So it's a big economic issue. And I think we as a public health system in Canada, we should be making this a pretty big priority. So how has the sedentary lifestyle during the pandemic changed things? I mean, this is one of the big questions I really want to get into with Chris and Anne-Marie. There's been some big changes to how we find those motivations, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. So one of the key things I think about the pandemic that we've seen is this idea of risk and safety and reward. So this is an often cited news article about the free active play over subsequent generations in the same rural area in the UK. So you see that big area that's outlined there, that kind of guitar pick shape, that was the zone that great-grandfather George was allowed to walk back when he was 8 years old. A 6-mile walk to go fishing at these fishing spots. Now his son, grandfather Jack, 8 years old back in the 1950s, was able to walk 1 mile on his own around the woods. That was his safety zone. His parents were comfortable with letting him go. You get next third generation, and the mother, Vicky, at age 8, was allowed to walk to the swimming pool that's half a mile away. We get to the son, Ed, 8 years old. This is back in 2007, allowed to walk on his own to the end of the street, 300 yards away. So when this article was published, this was back in 2007. I mean, this son is now 23 years old and he may soon have kids or already have kids, I don't know. But how has COVID impacted those kids and their ability to roam? As a society, we have a lot of questions about the risk and reward and safety and security. And a lot of us have lost social connections over the last couple of years, and gyms are closed and social gatherings are limited. There's lots of questions about what motivates people post-pandemic. Now, before the pandemic, one of the greatest predictors of physical activity was how close the gym was, the proximity to that rec facility. It directly correlated to the likelihood that you would reach your New Year's resolution. So number two on that list, or number 2 on the list is the buddy system. So top of the list for motivations is how close the gym is. Number two, having a buddy to get there. Create some accountability and makes it a social activity. And it just greatly increases the chances of long-term adherence to a lifestyle change. And this was, having this in knowledge, this is where I came up with the idea for Grand Sparks. And Chris, you were there. This was back in a snowy day in February, and I was looking at February 2015. I was looking at a grant opportunity to get seniors physically active. And Chris was at the office in Gateway. He was telling me about the Edge of Walton challenge course, that they had just set up this high ropes challenge course, the tower. And of course, all the local kids around Walton, they came out to play. And it was in the middle of summer, so the parents are working, the grandparents brought them. And the grandparents would just sit in the shade and socialize and chill out, but weren't exactly physically active. So I just kind of put two and two together and said, well, let's get these seniors active. So we were successful in that grant, and I launched the Grand Sparks Activity Day Camp. And the goal of the program was to challenge grandparents to keep up with the grandkids. And they had it in a morning of physical activity, outdoor play, recreation at the Edge of Walton. And the goal was to establish, during this 1 week day camp, establish an intergenerational pair as exercise buddies. And the hope of the program is that this pair would find something they like doing together and continue doing it together after the 1 week day camp was up. So they had all sorts of activities they tried out during the week. We had canoe, yoga, CrossFit, hiking, weightlifting, biking, exploring trails, exploring nature, catching frogs, axe throwing, archery. It's a little bit dangerous when you get a 6-year-old throwing axes, but you know, we had some fun. That idea of risk and reward. There's a safe way to do things. So finding something you like doing together, so that when this pair is together again, they're physically active doing something. At the end of the week, of course, we have this high ropes challenge course. It's really an exercise in perceived risk. For the kids, watching them complete a risky activity in a safe environment, it is a real boost of confidence for these kids. And even after they have this perceived risky experience, they have later on improved decision-making skills after the activity. There's an understanding of risk and reward. And for the grandparents, just keeping up with the grandkids was the challenge in and of itself. And a really important part of this whole program was the nutrition too. So some students there you see in the picture, that's Alana Roy, Julia Wild, Rachel Hales also. These are all Gateway summer students. They've all contributed to developing the nutrition program. And so after the morning of activity, the seniors, the grandparents, and the grandkids prepared lunch together. And each day had some sort of nutrition lesson. So things like, eat more fish or eat more omega-3 fatty acids. It has some strong evidence for cardioprotective effects and some brain health effects too. So we had some fish and foil on the campfire, simple outdoor meal we could prepare together. Or things like just drink more water and less sugary junk. Make that the lesson for the day. And it was more than just the actual food though. Having the techniques from the grandparents taught to the grandkids, what is the best way to chop a watermelon or to chop up a head of broccoli or the fastest way to hull strawberries. These grandparents have decades of experience in the kitchen and they're passing along these techniques and the knowledge to the kids. So the big question, what is this program a success? Does it work? Does it work to change behavior? Or motivations to exercise? Well, 6 months after the program, this is the 6-minute walk time was improved by 8%. So for those that don't know, the 6-minute walk test is a common, scientifically validated test. How far can you walk in 6 minutes? And that's a very accurate predictor of your cardiovascular health. So how healthy your heart and lungs are, just how far can you walk in 6 minutes? So 6 months after this 1 week program at Grand Sparks, we came back together, had the seniors do a walk around the track at the Clinton track, and the walk times were improved 8%. So a statistically significant improvement in cardiovascular health. These two, I think, RAPA scores and BREC-3 scores. These are two surveys: the Rapid Assessment of Physical Health and the Behavioral Regulation for Exercise Questionnaire. These are two surveys that assess your attitude towards being physically active and your motivations for being physically active. In particular, the RAPA score, it looks at the internal versus external motivators. It's an important discussion point right there in itself. If you're internally motivated to be physically active, it's more likely to be a long-lasting change rather than an external motivation. So those two test scores increased 6 months after the program. This is the one that I'm probably the most excited about, is this 14% increase in omega-3 fatty acid intake. You know, you tell people eat some more of these kinds of fish, and 6 months later they are. It's incredible. This 14% increase in omega-3 fatty acids with this population size that we're working with at Grand Sparks, I've calculated that this is actually likely prevented 1 heart attack if in this group of grandparents. So I'd say, you know, overall, this is a huge success for the Grand Sparks program. But what are some of the barriers that we're looking at to physical activity? I mean, there's one program that's very successful, but what are some of these barriers that stop people from being physically active? Well, I mean, the distance to the gym. We've talked about that. It's this huge geography we live in rural Ontario. So just getting there is an issue. We have so many trails though, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. The time is a barrier. Making the time, particularly for women in rural Ontario, who tend to be primarily the caregivers in their home. So being at home with the kids and just not having the time to have the physical activity in your day. Mental health is a huge, huge barrier for physical activity. There was one other program that we did at Gateway. We had a buddy walking program for some of the 5 local psychiatric outpatient facilities across Huron. So if you think of the 5 hospitals, there's across number 8, we got Goderich, Clinton, Seaforth, and then up and down number 4, we got Wingham and Exeter. And so across those 5 hospitals, we had a student who would go there 1 day a week for 6 weeks, just to go for a walk with the outpatient psychiatric patients. And the idea of having a buddy system. And well, in that particular group, did their health improve after 6 weeks? Well, we measured things like blood pressure and resting heart rate. There's the 6-minute walk time, no change. And BMI, so the body mass index, obesity, actually increased during this 6-week period because exercise is an appetite stimulant. And so there's an experiment. We're having a behavioral buddy walking program without the proper nutrition led to the undesired outcome. So mental health can be a huge barrier for physical activity. So how have attitudes toward physical activity changed in that group? So although we didn't do an assessment of that group with the attitudes towards change, all anecdotally, they all said they liked it. It was great to have a buddy to walk with at these outpatient programs. But these groups did not continue after the 6-week program was up. And I think this is something we might see a lot more of during the COVID pandemic recovery, is that it's this a real social, a real lack of social connection may have influenced or been a big barrier to physical activity. Alcohol, one of the often cited barriers to being physically active. It's not just the severe detrimental effects to mental health if consumed in excess long term. There's a lot of the behavioral changes that happen, not just the biochemistry there. But the big question, or the big answer to today's question, what are the enablers? What are the things that motivate people to get out? Well, in rural Ontario, let's not talk about distance to the gym. Let's talk about distance to the place. There are so many trails, the rec centers. I want the G2G trail. Chris, we're going to hear about that. There are so many opportunities in rural Ontario that might be hard to find, but once you find them close to your home, you're more likely to go. The Exercise Buddy, it's a great program. Seems to be age dependent though. Older adults prefer the social aspect of these physical activities, whereas younger people prefer solitary activities with the goals of a personal improvement rather than a social activity. Having a goal approach seems to be more successful than an avoid approach. So I'll give an example. A goal approach is a small realistic goal, like let's get to pickleball at least twice this month, or let's just do a flight of stairs without feeling winded. Versus the avoid approach would be, I'm not going to binge watch a Netflix series. The goal approach has more success than the avoid approach. And lastly, I mean, if we don't make time for our health will take time from you. And so these are just the four really most common enablers to physical activity. But I would like to open it up to our panelists now. I would love to hear, I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see your lovely faces. There we are. So I'd like to hear, Chris, we talked about some of the trails and the rec centers. Maybe could you explain the G2G trail and what it is and its place in the community and its vision for the future? But go ahead. Oh, I think you're on mute, Chris. Oh no, you're not on mute, we just can't hear you. No, sorry, I can't hear you, Christopher. Maybe okay, let's go to Anne-Marie while Christopher troubleshoots his audio. I know Chris is a very tech savvy guy, he'll figure it out. So, but Anne-Marie, so at the Y, what are some, I know, gyms were shut down for a while during the pandemic there. So what do you see as some of the big motivators that get people into the Y? And then we can talk about COVID after that.
Sure. I was excited to hear you mention the importance of social connections and the impact that that has on mental health, as well as being a motivator for physical activity. Because I will tell you, coming through 2 significant closures during COVID and having people return to activity at the Y, the number one thing people said they missed was people. The connections, those opportunities to feel like you belong and are part of something. Rarely did somebody come in and say, hey, I really missed my step class. It was the people, it was the instructor, it was that social part of belonging to a community is what really drove people to come back to the Y, where they feel like they belong.
Right, that social connection, I mean, so important. So I'm curious to know, what is the demographics of the typical people you see come to the Y? Like I said, younger people, is it from all ages, is it older folks? What do you see at the Goderich Y?
It's a mix. Like we say, we've got something here for all ages and all stages. What I have seen, particularly over, I would say, the last 7-8 years, is a real shift in terms of very active older adults. So the retiree looks a lot different now than they did a decade and 2 decades ago. They're very active. So when you come into the Y in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, it's booming here. And often folks come in and say, oh, we didn't expect it to be this busy, but the gym's full of pickleballers. The ice is full of people out there playing huff and puff hockey, which is a hockey league for over 50. And there's people coming in, walking the track. Like there is a hustle and bustle here. And then we move into sort of that after school, into the early evening crowd. And that's where young people are coming in after school, adults are coming in after work, and families are coming in as well.
Right. Yeah. So it really is a wide swath of all demographics.
Yeah.
Wow. Chris, have you got your audio yet? No, can't hear you. I know you've got my cell phone. If you call my cell phone, I'll put you on my on speaker here, and you can talk as normal, and we'll hear you from the audience will hear you. Does that work for you? Possible workaround? Okay. Well then, Anne-Marie, the next question for you is, how has COVID changed? How has activities at the Y? We're starting to see the resurgence of people coming for social gatherings now. There's Chris on the phone. But how has COVID changed things at the Y?
I think we're a reflection of how COVID has changed in people's lives too. Folks are very protective of their time. We certainly have learned to value our time and how we spend our time. So we see people coming in here, they want social interaction with folks. They want to have fun. Life has been challenging and stressful over the last couple of years, and people want to come in here and enjoy themselves, have fun, do something with their kids, or do something for themselves. They're looking for programs and activities that really support that goal.
Good. Oh, thank you. That's an optimistic view of our recovery from COVID. So thank you for that. Chris, let's see if we can get your audio here. There. I think that should work now. Oh, maybe. Uh-oh. I think you're going to have to turn your audio down to make this work, Chris. I think headphones, that works better. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
We're getting,
I'm getting a little feedback.
we are. So I've got my speakers off. What do I get? I think that might work. It's good. That sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
So on with the trail, because I think I have a relevant observation now. So for anyone that doesn't know, the D2G rail trail literally goes from Goderich to Guelph. It's an abandoned railway right away. It's a project I've been involved in for 10 years. And the interesting part about it was that, or there's a number of interesting things, but in the context of what we're talking about, in 2020, we had the opportunity to do a major resurfacing of the trail. So it's basically been in use at some level since the 1990s, and well-developed at either end of the Goderich and the Trip Association across the mainland at the Messman Bridge. Residents would be familiar with that part of it. But in fact, you could keep going all the way to Guelph on that right away. And similarly, at the Cape Kissingbridge Trail section down between coming east or west from Guelph, well maintained and developed and used quite a bit. But the middle third of it is rarely used. And had gotten overgrown, and it was only the diehards would push through. I mean, my cycle that was dodging and groundhog holes and brambles up to your waist and spots in August, and bugs and what have you. It was enough of a thing that some friends of ours walked the whole thing and wrote a whole book about it. So in 2020, we undertook to clear, grade, resurface the entire trail, so that included that middle third that previously hadn't been done, and it meant, sort of a more standard, a higher standard for the surface for all the other bits that I mentioned, that, mainland and the KBT. And I originally thought what we would see would be an increase in sort of experience cycling, the sort of spandex wearing group, with water bottles clipped all over their bikes and that type of thing. And I expected, hordes of them coming up the trail. In actual fact, what happened was my 92-year-old mother went out there and did 2 kilometers with a walker, because all of a sudden the trail surface permitted her to do that. And the thing she wanted to walk through, a wetland and a pond and things that she actually had never seen, and I had talked to her about. It meant that a woman in a wheelchair from Guelph did the entire trail from end to end with her husband and an entourage of neighbors and friends. So there was a curve of spandex wearing diehard cyclists out there. But they're probably, I had trail cameras out there last summer, late in the summer. I was actually trying to catch ATVs, which fortunately turned out there wasn't very many of. But I got a remarkable number of cyclists. And so what I saw in September, and on sections that I said previously were rarely traveled. I mean, it was as close to zero as makes no difference, 4 years ago. Out in the wilds between Auburn and Blythe, say, or between Walton and Blythe. And on rainy, drizzly, cold September midweek day, the least I ever counted was 45 to 50 people went by those trail cameras. And you would, if you sort of, with one of the benefits of the video is you kind of have a little snapshot of who they were, and you can try to assess what type of user you think it is. And I would, my guess, my visual assessment was, it was about a third of them were actually just local people. They were walking or cycling, but nothing fancy, just something that got out of the garage. About a third of them looked like they were reasonably experienced, well equipped, and were going somewhere. They had backpacks or they had saddlebags and that kind of thing. And I should say the first third, you see them go one way and then come back the other way. That second third, you would see them go one way. So you could pretty well figure if you're carrying some gear, they're going somewhere, maybe coming back on the weekend or whatever. Then there's another third, actually maybe less of it, where those guys with their heads down, and you could tell they got a heart monitor strapped on, and they're cycling with major purpose. So that was fairly unexpected to me, that improving the surface alone, because we didn't really do anything else. The trail had always been there. I mean, my mother could have walked those 2 kilometers, but less likely because stumbling around with a walker and coarse gravel versus a nice smooth graded surface. So
I think a question here that you're leading to, a question that this audience member asked, and that's, there's so few options in the wintertime around here. Like the trails can be hazardous. I mean, even the G2G trails, it's hard to access in the winter. So maybe both Chris and Anne Marie, would you like to talk about some of the winter options that are available around here? Or maybe Chris, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe G2G is great in the winter. Let's have you go first.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say great.
I would say challenging, but not unusable. Like, again, we've had people go end to end on skis. Snowshoeing's an option. I mean, to some degree, you need to toughen up a bit. Just, it's not going to be May. It is going to be January. The other thing is, I made a bit of fun out of this winter. It was maybe instructive. I got an mountain bike, which I really enjoy riding. It's got 2-inch tires, so it's fairly tolerant of ice and snow and things. And I have my prior life, I was a motorcycle racer, so I'm kind of, my tolerance of slipperiness and things like that maybe a little higher than most, but anyhow, I went out on January the 1st with my mountain bike and did the, I don't know, it was 5 kilometers down the trail. It was snowy and cold and what have you. Posted up on Facebook and I said, I've been out cycling every day this year. How about you? And, everybody got the joke, but then the pressure was on me to go out the next day.
Yep.
And then I ended up, it was almost the end of January, so it's well on towards the end of January. I was literally out in the blizzard, my wife said I was going to be lost and told me I was an idiot. But anyway, so we do have to accept the fact that, conditions aren't prime, but they aren't impossible. So that's part of it. Nobody's going to be out there and just because they don't groom the trail for skiing doesn't mean you can't go skiing or go snowshoeing or do something. So it's more that getting past getting out the door and being active and then putting up with what you got to do to get there.
Right. Well, on the topic of getting off the couch, I'd like to hear from Anne-Marie. What are some of the things you see at the Y that through the winter time get people off the couch and more active?
Yeah, for sure. And I can tie into the question that your audience member asked as well. So several years ago, we were hearing from folks in the community, in particular older adults, talking about winter weather as a barrier and an interruption in their walking routine. And alongside that, we started to work with the Maitland Valley Family Health Team, who were also hearing and seeing reports that patients were walking less during the winter months as well, and kind of having that conversation with their docs about the barriers and the challenges of living in this part of the world. So we partnered with the Family Health Team and have developed a walking program. It started out as just a winter walking program, so kind of a November to March, twice a week on the indoor track here at the Y. And we ran it that way for a few winters very successfully. And then participants started to ask for, could this become a year-round program? Because they had developed that routine, that exercise habit, and also those social connections. So this program runs now 12 months of the year on Tuesday and Thursday mornings here at the Y. It's free for everyone in the community. You don't have to be a rostered patient of the Maitland Valley Family Health Team. You just register for the program and you can come in and walk on Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings between 9 and 11. And we have upwards of 60 walkers that now come out. It's really grown into an amazing program.
Wow. Now that's the kind of thing that I like to hear about. That's a started out as a small group, and it's through word of mouth has spread to become a much bigger group coming in. That's one of the other programs in Goderich, the Healthy Hearts program. I know they're at the Y now doing their thing, and I think that's one of those programs that there's some confusion with where the program's going to end up long term right now, but I think it's one of those things that the community really needs to get behind to say, yeah, we need this here, because like I said, the proximity of the gym, the proximity of the place is one of the most likely influencers to if you're going to go, and having that long-term adherence. So for those that don't know, the Healthy Hearts program is a cardio rehabilitative program. So people who have had some heart issues that come in and they're mentored on how to get into a good physical shape. And it establishes that accountability with the buddy system, and again, having that close proximity is just a huge benefit to our local community health. That I think we got to promote that program in any way we can.
And one of the things that's really special about that program is for an individual that's gone through a cardiac event, that's very traumatic. So then to wrap yourself into a program where people are supportive of you, your exercise is being coached and monitored, it's a really special program that we have in our community, and one that I hope we continue to flourish and grow.
Right. Good. So, here I got Chris trying to say something. I crank up the volume on here, Chris. Or go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I came out of that experience I related around, after we surfaced the trail, is the lack that we have in the community of sort of entry points exercise for, so that point where you can start, where you do get off the couch and you maybe don't want to go to a gym and feel less, sort of a judgmental situation or cost, or there's all kinds of barriers we don't perceive, and we need places that are as available and as safe and as barrier free as possible, and the trail just happens to be one. I mean, even the G2G as a rail trail is superior in that respect from a footpath, because if women have a concern around safety in a footpath in the bush, or there's all kinds of footing and slipperiness. Like the beauty of a rail trail is that it gives you an entry point to start doing something. The only thing it asks of you is to put one foot in front of the other. When we were building the trail and we were arguing at one point, me and one of the guys who was working on it were debating how much to do some servicing in a spot that didn't really need it. But he said, you need the visual cue that the trail is there. And it's stuck in my mind ever since, because now I can see it, like, totally. When you come down the trail, that visual cue that you just have to keep going. You don't have to think. You don't have to worry about it, turning. You just put one foot in front of the other, or one pedal in front of the other. So it's an entry point for people just to move, which is the first thing you got to do, is make it as simple as you can, make it as safe as you can, make it as obvious as you can, and as enjoyable and non-threatening. And we don't have a lot of places like that. On the trail, I see a lot of families with little kids, and the kids can run wild. The kids can be a half a kilometer ahead of mom and dad on their 10-inch wheel bicycle, and mom and dad are relaxed and enjoying watching the birds. And you can pave shoulders, and you do all sorts of other things. You even have a park you couldn't do that in, right? Mom would be sort of edgy and making sure they didn't run across the street chasing a ball or something. So I see that as I see that as a strength of the rail trail. I see it as a need more broadly across the community, and to be able to travel a short distance and have access to that is kind of rare in our county and rural. When there's a sort of standard measure, I think, around arenas and things that we have, where it says, well, the catchment area, sort of a 20-minute, half-hour drive. The trail is catchment within 20 minutes or half an hour. It's about 40,000 people in the county. It's quite amazing, that we do have it there, but treat it as that entry level in terms of participation, because it asks so little, and maybe you never progress beyond that, but it's measurable. You can say, well, I did this kilometer, or I did to that intersection, or whatever it is, whatever measurement you want. It gives you a progressive way of evolving your participation too. So anyway, it's just that, again, just an observation that it offers that, and we need more of that.
No, a good observation. So I think we're coming up our final minute or two here. So let's get some final closing remarks. So Chris, you go first. What's with what do you see as some of the biggest motivators for getting people moving?
I think a big one with kids is letting them be kids.
Get over the whole, that graphic you showed of that constraint distance. I can remember being a kid and getting on a horse and riding 5 miles, doing all that sort of stuff, and somehow there was safe and nobody worried about it. I don't think the risk factors have actually changed. My granddaughter actually could do the same thing, but a perception of risk. So we need to rethink how that happens. I mean, I see it here with the challenge course all the time. Like as you said, with the that kind of managed risk opportunity you give kids, but those are the ones where you just let them fall. As I say, I raced motorcycles for 40 years, so people break their leg and arm things occasionally. Not, no more frequently than necessary, but there's rewards to taking those risks too, and we we deprive our kids and each other of something when we don't, we're too packaged in our experiences to ever get that.
No, I think you're right. It's the risk reward can be a big motivator. Anne-Marie, let's hear from you. Some final thoughts on what motivates people to move.
I often talk to people and say, worry less about what you think you should be doing and find something that you want to do. Find something that you experience and it brings you some joy, and then put your focus on that. And I think that ties into one of your viewers asked a question, Donna, about, should I follow something structured or go on my own? Find something that you are going to have some fun with. And it might be starting out in a class or a structured activity, and go from there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Anne-Marie. That was the perfect answer for Donna's question. That's find what works for you. Anyways, Dan is here to reel in the curtain, so I'll let you closing remarks, Dan.
When I've been the moderator, I've always hated to end the chat, but this has been fascinating. And so thank you, all three of you, for really a job well done and leaving the audience wanting more. So just in summary, I'll say we know exercise and nutrition are critical to many areas of well-being, and our challenge is now to digest all this great information and utilize it to better our own health. And today's lecture demonstrates exactly what Gateway is all about, and that is bringing relevant health information to our rural residents. Better quality nutrition, effective exercise, and mobility are important. And while the pandemic certainly made getting those essentials more difficult for many, hopefully now we can get back to healthy social activities. Thank you, Jay, for creating a conversation surrounding this topic. And Chris and Anne-Marie, thank you for your contribution to the discussion. I want to, at this time, also thank our sponsors for their continued support. Without them, the lecture series would not be possible. They include CIBC Private Wealth Management, De Jager Town Square IDA Pharmacy in Goderich, CERH Goderich, and the Town of Goderich. These are our key funders for these lectures. Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health is a not-for-profit organization with charitable status, and we greatly appreciate and welcome the support we receive. If you'd like to donate to Gateway in support of this lecture series and our other activities, I encourage you to visit the Gateway website and click on the donate button. And so thank you again to all of you, all of the attendees, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next lecture series event on April 5th, when Dr. Paul Gill will be our speaker. The title of his presentation is Digital Health, How to Navigate Care with a Doc in a Box. A lot of people out in the community know a little bit about Gateway, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit more. One of the things we do is employ and mentor local university students for a summer of health research with the support of our research chairs. Last summer, we had the pleasure of having Kayla Goche from Blythe work with Dr. Al Lozon on the Food Insufficiency in Seniors project in Huron, Bruce, Grey, and Perth counties. And I'd like to read you a note that we received from Kayla last Friday. She says, I wanted to reach out to express my gratitude once again for the opportunity you gave me last summer and to share some exciting news. I have just learned that I was selected for a prestigious research internship at Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden this summer. I was given such an opportunity from the experience I gained working on the food insecurity and accessibility project last summer. I am incredibly grateful to Gateway for opening the doors to endless opportunities for all students. Once again, thank you for everything you do to support students and for the work you do at Gateway. I hope to be in touch again soon. That was really nice to hear from her, and we wish her well in the future. If you'd like to learn more about Gateway, as I said, check out our new website. It's well worth a visit. And we hope you'll pass the lecture series information along to your networks. We would like to expand the reach of this lecture series with the aim of promoting the knowledge economy, reducing social isolation, and supporting Gateway's mission of improving the health and quality of life of rural residents. Before leaving, I want you to know that Gateway stands with the people of the Ukraine in their struggle against the Russian invasion. If you would like to donate, I believe Anne Marie, would you like to just say one word or two about that?
We are collecting donations here at the Goderich Y. You're welcome to drop them off during all the hours that we're open. We appreciate everything.
Anything at all, like clothing, household items?
Clothing and food items are at the top of the list. Obviously, non-perishable food items and new clothing is preferred. Adult and children clothing is what we're looking for.
Good. Okay, thanks, Emery. All right, then with that, we'll wrap. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you for donating, and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.